We are directly affected by what happened in these two countries. Myanmar, because of security issues, 1643-kilometer long border, and various issues connected to border security. Also because Myanmar is the bridge between South and Southeast Asia, and it is vital for our Act East policy. And we need Act East. Act East is vital. Bangladesh, on the other hand, is critical because of the security aspect, the economic aspect, and the Act East aspect.
Greetings, listeners, and welcome to our third podcast of our podcast series, Reimagining the Bay of Bengal, presented by Asian Confluence. And I'm your host, Neeraj. And today we are navigating the complex geopolitical currents of the region, exploring how great power dynamics are reshaping security and cooperation. So, Asian Confluence has established the Center of Bay of Bengal Studies in Shillong to promote research, dialogue, and collaboration of the region's shared future. So in this particular episode, we are dwelling into the navigating great power competition in the Bay of Bengal region. So as always, we'll unpack this through 5 thought-provoking questions designed to spark clarity and inspire conversation. To speak on this, today we are joined by Major General Alok Deb, Sena Medal, Visis Sena Medal, who has served in the Indian Army for nearly 4 decades, including command during the Kargil War, where he was decorated for gallantry. He holds an MSc in Defense Studies and 2 MPhil degrees in Defense and Strategic Studies, with an experience in the UN Peacekeeping Force Military Personnel Officer at UNFIL, Lebanon. He has commanded an artillery brigade on northern borders, an artillery division on the western border, and overseen artillery employment in India's eastern theatre. He was also a former Deputy Director General at Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis, and he has contributed to security analysis in South Asia and the Indo-Pacific. He is also a Senior Visiting Fellow at the Peninsula Foundation, Distinguished Fellow at the USI India, and was also appointed the Distinguished Fellow of the Asian Conference in April 2024. General Deb has also written a piece titled Security and Cooperation in the Bay of Bengal region in the inaugural souvenir of the center. So the link is also in the video description. General Deb, it's an honor to have you with us today.
Thank you, Neeraj. Very kind of you. Honor to be on this platform.
Thank you, sir.
Look forward to your.
Thank you so much, sir. So let's jump right in, and just to start with our conversation, I would want to start our conversation with an overview of the region's security landscape. And so my first question would be to you that how would you assess the current security environment in the Bay of Bengal region, particularly in the light of evolving political, maritime, and strategic dynamics across the region? Over to you, sir.
The current security environment is influenced by a number of factors. The socio-political and economic conditions of the states in the Bay, the presence of outside powers in the region and their interests, and the intra-regional dynamics between various countries in the Bay itself. In addition, you have these things like climate change, migration, terrorism, religious fundamentalism, which also impinge on the security environment. Now, geographically, there are only 3 countries in the Bay's northern edges, and in the south, we have Sri Lanka. And in earlier times, there was a huge amount of movement from this region into China and Southeast Asia. And whether it was merchant trade, commerce, religion, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam. But except for the Chola invasion, I think, of the 11th century, everything was peaceful. Then you had the Portuguese and the Dutch and the British and the French. And I think you could call it European great power competition for India. The British, of course, at the end of the day, Pax Britannica ruled, and the British continued till Malaya, where they made the created Malaya states. And then they got their storekeepers and their tradesmen and their navy and their armies and established Pax Britannica. They've gone. But after they went, then we had our newly independent states, and a very different sort of dynamic came into the region. Today, the Bay of Bengal is, yes, the scene of great power competition. There are multiple powers here. You have the Quad presence. I will summarize it by saying you have the Quad presence. We had Malabar 2024, the naval exercise in the Bay of Bengal itself. That was the first. So that shows where this place is in terms of the interests of Australia, Japan, and the United States. There is a Chinese presence, very deep. There is a Russian presence. And in the Greater Indian Ocean region, you have a French presence because the French have their island territories. Now, China is fully entrenched into the economies of Sri Lanka and lesser so in the economy of Bangladesh and also in Myanmar. American and Russian aid also flows, but on much lesser scales. With so many powers out here, obviously someone going to be working at cross purposes, so there are frictions that arise. About the political issues, political models, of the four in the Bay, we are a full-fledged democracy. Sri Lanka has come back to stability and it's elected a president, a leftist president first of his kind. But after the economic crisis, they have clawed their way back into a great semblance of stability. Bangladesh has had various attempts at democracy, and for various reasons, it hasn't been successful. They're having another attempt now next month. Though so I personally feel that's a little surprising because if there is one country that fulfills the requirements of a classic Westphalian state, nation state, that is Bangladesh. One contiguous territory, one language, one ethnicity, one religion. When I say one, I mean 90% or so. So despite that, they have these fizzy-terrorist tendencies. Myanmar, of course, is a different case where you have 135 ethnic groups, you have 50 odd ethnic armed organizations, and the terrain is very difficult. And you have the military, which is seen as a unifier, and to the extent that militaries can unify worldwide, traditionally in history. Overall, I reckon these two countries are going through a very turbulent phase. As I said, Sri Lanka is relatively stable, but there's an element of unpredictability. I mean, when you read the newspapers across the region, something or the other keeps happening almost on a weekly basis. And all you need is a trigger, tactical trigger to set off alarms. There's French intelligence will tell you suddenly that there is a Chinese spy vessel moving with its automatic identification system of 120 kilometers, 120 nautical miles to the on our east coast, and all sorts of alarms go off. So something of the sort is happening. Overall, I would say politically, this is where we are. The security situation is volatile. Economically, I'll talk about that a little later. So that is a very brief overview.
I would say that's a very comprehensive assessment, and it really sets the stage for the upcoming challenges which we are going to experience in the coming time in the Bay of Bengal region. And coming to that point, we have also experienced that, experienced and seen that Myanmar has also recently held the elections, while Bangladesh is also scheduled to go for the polls shortly. Whether it depends on their political situation. But seeing overall of all these challenges, how might all these political developments which are there, how it is going to affect the regional stability in what is already a hostile security landscape? What are your opinion on it, sir?
We are directly affected by what happened in these two countries. Myanmar, because of security issues, 1643-kilometer long border and various issues connected to border security. Also because Myanmar is the bridge between South and Southeast Asia, and it is vital for our Act East policy. And we need Act East. Act East is vital. Bangladesh, on the other hand, is critical because of the security aspect, the economic aspect, and the Act East aspect. Because to clarify, it is not just security of the Northeast, but the security of peninsular India as well, because whatever happens there, the fallout is to the west as well as to the east. So it is critical to the security aspects both for peninsular India and for the Northeast. Secondly, the enormous gain that we've made in terms of road, riverine, and rail connectivity over the last 2 decades, and the benefits that have accrued mutually to both countries, we risk losing that. I have no data to support a statement I'm about to make. The statement is that it's worth checking up the growth rate of the Northeast over the last few years. The Ministry of Northeast has done a great job. A lot of money has gone into it. A lot of skill development has got into it. But the way it was, it has come up a lot. How much has this connectivity through Bangladesh contributed to this? It's a question worth asking, and it's worth thinking about. So we risk losing this advantage, and so our trade might stagnate, it might go down. Thirdly, if relations are inimical, then Act East gets hobbled. And if Act East, I mean, you can't even access your own Northeast, so where will you go as far as Act East is concerned? I was just reading about there's a Bangladeshi journalist, his name is Saklain Rizvi. He wrote in the Diplomat in October last year. He said that exports to India, obviously at the time of writing, October last year, were up 2.4%. So that appeared to be quite strange. But they have this magazine, which they have this newspaper which got attacked the other day, Kokamalo. On the 7th of Jan, they have said that exports to India fell by more than 6.5%. So obviously, we are on a negative trajectory as far as trade is concerned. Though major transactions do continue, they've imported 50,000 tons of rice in December. They signed that contract, and I think 180,000 tons of diesel is what they're doing. And despite all the hoopla, I think just one contract has been cancelled, and that is for tugboats, which are being made by Garden Reach, Calcutta. So this guy Rizvi also said, and I quote, it's worth listening. He said, shared borders with India, transport links, and regional connectivity have rendered New Delhi an essential ally in maintaining the industrial base of Bangladesh. That's a very realistic statement. So, to some extent, we might find economic ties partially insulated. And also, we must remember that there is a sizable and patriotic community within that country which is not averse to better ties with India. A sizable community which is not averse to better ties with India. Unfortunately, economic extremists have captured the narrative, and the unfortunate outcome is visible, greatly exaggerated on social media. But yes, their ties with Pakistan, military to military. I have lost count of the number of exchanges between senior military officers over the last few years, over the last few months. Their programs, their ammunition, their purchase of J-17 fighter jets, which is under discussion. They're having cultural exchanges, student exchanges. They're having Urdu mushairas in Dhaka. But none of this compares even remotely in scope and size with what India has done, what India offers, what India can do. Now it's for them to carry out a cost-benefit analysis. It's for them to carry out a cost-benefit analysis. As far as China is concerned, Sheikh Hasina was a balancer. But China continues to gain ground. You will remember that when Chief Advisor Yunus came to power, his first trip was to China, and they signed a number of agreements. So it is the evolving security situation which is always going to color our perspective. Bangladesh should understand that because of dictates of geography, security will always be a major component of our policy toward that country. And if they succumb to radicals who are ambiguous over the spirit of 71, it's going to be very difficult for this region. So we hope that an elected government, when it comes to power, looks at relations with India in a very rational manner. In a very rational manner. And we have to be careful to ensure that our valid concerns about the security of minorities, they're valid concerns, how much they impact the larger country-to-country relationship. More so because the generation that has seen 1971 is passing on. And the huge emotional leverage that we had over that country is bound to reduce. I mean, it's a fact of life. There's nothing either side can do about it. People are dying. It goes to the history books. How much people read history? Well, you know what I mean. So we hope that a government which comes to power there looks at us rationally. Now that's as far as this country is concerned. Now in Myanmar, if you recall, we pursued a fairly consistent policy. I'm going to quote from the MES speeches and statement from their website, what they said after the February 2021 coup. And they said that we have noted the developments in Myanmar with deep concern. India has always been steadfast in its support to the process of democratic transition in Myanmar. We believe that the rule of law and the democratic process must be upheld. That's what Government of India said. Our engagement with the junta continues. Our military-to-military cooperation, in any case, it was minimal. That's reduced even further. While we remain neutral, we've been speaking to everybody across the political horizon, including the insurgent groups active on our borders. You will recall that somewhere in 2024, towards the end of 2024, we had planned to call everybody, the junta, the Tamano, as well as the rebel groups for a meeting in Delhi, in the in that the Ministry of External Affairs think tank. I'm forgetting the name right now. However, it turned out into two separate meetings. So we have met interlocutors across the political spectrum. So while we remain neutral, we've spoken to everybody. The rebel groups are active on our borders. Simultaneously, we've tightened border control. We know the issues: Chin refugees, trafficking of all types, smuggling. So now we also have four states: 16 for the Arunachal, Nagaland, Manipur, Mizoram, in that order. Now the dichotomy in the approach also has been rationalized to a great extent, because Mizoram has an emotional connect with the people who are coming across. There are tribals in Manipur also who have an emotional connect. There are others who do not have that and who look at it purely as a nuisance and as a refugees and as a security problem. But we have rationalized that now. So today we have a free movement regime which gives scope for trans-border movement, though we've tightened it. It used to be 40 kilometers a long time ago, came down to 16, today it's 10. And from 43 crossing places, we've come down to 22 in each of these, totally in these four states. And passes have become far more regulated, but we left it open. At the same time, we are also carrying out, the plan is to fence the entire border, but the terrain is very difficult, the costs are difficult, and as I said, we are reconciling the emotional and political requirements on ground with the hard realities of security. So this, I suppose, is something, this is the approach we will continue. In 2024, that was a high point for the rebel groups. 2025, now the Chinese have come in, they've been able to help the. Now, China wants to ensure that its investments in Myanmar are safe. It wants to ensure that the CMEC is functional. So it switches the pressure on the ethnic organizations like a tap on and off, and it supports the military wherever it feels the military will suit Chinese interests better. So the Arakan army has not been able to capture Kok Fu, it's not been able to capture Sitwe, despite fighting for so long. The elections have been held. Phase 1, they had just 52% vote. Phase 2, the thing is yet to come. Phase 3 will be held shortly. There's a quote I want to give out. This is a scholar from the Stimson Institute, a person called Amara Tia. That person says that Beijing believes it can tolerate a divided Myanmar so long as the main power holders remain dependent on China for trade, energy, and administrative coordination. This means that no single group can secure access to key resources, cross-border channels of commerce, or official approvals without running it by Beijing. The Americans went back on the Burma Act, which Joe Biden had authorized, and so American aid is reduced. You remember that now the junta is fighting back, China is supporting them. So where does it leave us? Rohingyas will remain with all the ramifications. 180,000 Rohingyas were to be repatriated to Myanmar. That hasn't happened. So they will continue to strain Bangladesh's civic society, their resources, their law and order, their crime, terrorism, what have you. Their relations between Bangladesh and Myanmar will remain adversarial. People will keep getting blown up with those mines on the border. They will have border clashes. The Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army will continue to make armed forays across. The International Court of Justice is hearing the case by the Gambia on the genocide in Myanmar. We don't know what's going to happen about that. So Bangladesh will not cut off relations because it has to get those Rohingyas back in some way or the other, and they are neighbors. As far as we are concerned, we will strengthen our border. We will manage the free movement regime. We will engage with the rebel groups because we have major investment there too, the Karadan multimodal power project.
So that's a very timely insight, I would say, and these political changes will clearly have some ripple effects, but that is there for time to see. And over the past decade, we have also seen that the major powers such as the United States and the China have very much significantly extended their strategic, economic, and maritime presence also in the Bay of Bengal. So, how do you evaluate these kind of implications of intensifying US-China competition for regional security and smaller littoral states which are there in the Bay of Bengal region?
For various reasons, this we are the flavor of the season. Everybody seems to be looking towards us. In December 2025, there were five Chinese survey ships in the Bay of Bengal. And you know what these survey ships do? They map ocean currents, ocean temperatures, current flows, barometric pressures, and they put them into algorithms, and they know what the perfect state of the ocean is at various days on various times of the year. Any disturbance in that, then they relocate, whether it is a big fish which is coming, whether it is a submarine. The fact is that stealth, the cover which stealth was providing, is gradually being divested by the data and the algorithm that these spy ships are generating. At any moment of time, there's so many fishing vessels there. One thing to be remembered, the Chinese, the first submarine they gave to any country in Southeast Asia was to Myanmar. They gave them a Ming class. Of course, we'd given them a kilo class earlier for training purposes. That was much earlier. But the Chinese, the first country they gave it to was Myanmar. Now, the Chinese are also building that $1.2 billion base near Chittagong. It used to be called BNS Sheikh Hasina. Now it's called BNS Pekwa. So the Chinese have got a hand there. Now, you know what happened when we issued that notice for airmen when we had carried out the test last month for one of our missiles, for a K4 missile. It came out in the papers. And we had to issue there were ships which kept moving. We cancelled it. They moved back. We gave the notice again. Again, they moved forward. So this went on. I think 3 times we had to cancel that notice. So China needs unimpeded access to the Indian Ocean. China covets the marine fishing out there. Bangladesh is already reporting hugely depleted fishing stocks. China is trying to edge out India from development on the Mongla port, which is funded by the Exim Bank, because the government of Bangladesh is re-examining the deal. Work is at a standstill. Similarly, is the case with the Paira port, which India Ports Global had started negotiating 10 years back in 2016. That work is at a standstill. In Chittagong, luckily, we are still able to use the port. Sheikh Hasina wanted to give us some work there. That is not progressed, though we still use it for as a port, to say. In Sri Lanka, Trincomalee is emerging as an energy hub. You know, we had this deal last year where our Indian Oil Corporation, Sri Lankan subsidy, and the UAE, and we signed a deal, the pipeline and the oil farm that we manage. However, in Colombo Port, the Chinese got a better deal. They took an 85% stake in the international container terminal. The Sri Lankans gave us the West Coast Terminal, West Container Terminal, where we have a 51% stake. Amman we know what the Chinese have done, and with a 6.3% rate of interest. Now, as per a January 25 agreement, the Chinese are supposed to build an oil refinery in Amman. So I do not know the latest progress in that. But geography dictates that Sri Lanka should be closer to India. After all, how wide is the Pak Strait? However, sovereignty issues, which are both political, economic, and that intangible emotional, that prevents Sri Lanka from being dependent on India to a point. Also, Sri Lanka's attempt at balancing is constrained by the huge Chinese presence there that has been encouraged by previous regimes. China wants the sea lines of communication open. It wants to restrict India and Indian Ocean. It wants to protect its economic infrastructure that it has built to derive leverage. But statistics show that after the economic crisis of 2022, their investments have slowed. They haven't played up the way the Sri Lankan wanted. We, on the contrary, provided a total of 4 billion line of credit, and we have done our bit, and that has helped. However, we are also trying to reduce our dependence on Colombo port. If you remember, we just opened that new deep sea water port in Kerala, Vizinjam, that's the name. So, surprisingly, to some extent in Sri Lanka, to counter Chinese presence, the Indian and American interests might coincide for a short while. As far as Bangladesh is concerned, last year there were two scholars from Bangladesh who wrote in the US Naval Institute magazine. It's online. They spoke of the benefit to the US if it uses naval facilities in Bangladesh. They said, Diego Garcia is too far away. How will you monitor the Indo-Pacific? You take a base here. Carry out refitting, rearming. Keep an eye on Kyaukphu, checkmate Chinese influence in Myanmar and the region. They even suggested using Matarbari, which is being constructed by the Japanese, as a base for blockading potential Chinese ships. It's there online. However, the new Trump national security strategy makes it very clear we will interfere in case our interests are threatened. Now, Bangladesh has played it smartly. They have been negotiating very well with the Americans. They brought their tariffs down. There have been numerous visits from the Americans to Bangladesh. So I don't think they will derail this relationship. They will try and make things better. So I think they will carry out some balancing between the Americans and the Chinese now. They were not going to irritate the Americans anymore. Myanmar has that other issue about rare earths. This is something which has come up in the last 1.5 years, because as per a Stimson report again of June 2025, I think 60% by value, 60% by value of China's rare earth imports come from Kachin state, and that's on the board. And after President Trump's tariff threat, General Leng, the Supreme Council head, he wrote a letter to President Trump where he thanked him and he praised him for shutting down those media outlets that were fueling anti-junta propaganda. So whether it was in response or unrelated, the US lifted sanctions on several of allies of Myanmar generals and their military-linked companies. Now, US is also discussing how to get hold of these resources. I mean, it's on open source media, how to get hold of these rare earths. How do they do it? Through the junta, through the Kachins, but how to move the minerals out from under China's nose? Do they get it by road to India, a road which can be interdicted? And if they move south, if they move it by sea, they have to take it right down the whole of Myanmar to Rakhine or Erwadi. So one doesn't expect any any major developments by the Americans in Myanmar unless the Chinese up their game. In that case, the Americans might react. Now you have the Russians. Russia has supplied nuclear reactors to Bangladesh for the Rupur nuclear plant. Rupur 1 trial run was to start, that's got delayed. Rupur 2 construction has also got delayed. General Leng has made, in Myanmar, General Leng has made 7 trips to Russia. So the Russians are investing in nuclear power there in one country, and they're looking at, the Burmese are looking at nuclear and space cooperation with Russia. And General Leng has also obtained confirmation of Russian investment in the Dawei deep sea port and a special economic zone southeast of Kyoto. Now, Russia is also the main supplier of weaponry to Myanmar. So, if you want to see great power competition, Myanmar is sandwiched between Chinese economic help, Russian military assistance, with the US looking at its rare earths and provided limited aid through international organizations. This is great power competition in one country. That's where we are.
Yes, sir. So that's a very, I would say a very sobering evaluation of how the great power revival is happening in the Bay of Bengal region, and it highlights the pressure which is there on the smaller nation. Now coming to our own country, India. So India has also traditionally viewed, the Bay of Bengal and the wider Indian Ocean as the central to its strategic interests. So if you could briefly assess the India's current approach and how it should be on its priorities of managing the growing presence of extra regional powers like all the countries, the geopolitical rivalry which we just talked about. What are your views on it, sir?
You remember what I said right in the beginning? I said that in ancient times when we moved eastwards, other than the Chola invasion, everything was peaceful. The Indian ethos is not that of an aggressor. We are not made that way. A simple look at the websites of the high commissions and embassies of India in various countries in South Asia will reveal just how much we've done for our neighbors. If you just look, it is telling from the 50s onward the amount of money, the amount of resources, amount of things we've done for our neighbors. I mean, it is an education for the people of our country that how much we've done. Medical aid, health, infrastructure, education, training, trade, defense cooperation, we've done it all. Huge amounts have been invested. All we want is a peaceful neighborhood and non-interference of outside powers. Now, the imbalance between big and small is very real. There's no doubt about it. And this distorts perceptions, especially when nations invoke the UN rule of one nation, one vote. But the fact is that there is a big nation and there are small nations. So there will be an imbalance, and one has to accept that there is a big nation there. And it is very easy, however, for interested parties to translate this equation into jingoism, which is what many of our neighbors do. And that, unfortunately, is a reality. So, what do we do? We wait it out using patient diplomacy. We're not going to go and attack them. We let them resolve the issues. And to that extent, this pays. It is paid in Sri Lanka, it's paid in the Maldives. We hope it will pay here too. Because we do not want to get involved in that internal past problem that is not going. Our relationship with Sri Lanka is a good example. I mean, just see what we've done right now. Our operation Sagar Bandhu is still going on after their cyclone. I think $450 million worth of aid. Our medical teams are still there. The paramedical company is still there. Our engineers are laying baby bridges. Hopefully, Bangladesh will have a more amenable dispensation post elections. With Myanmar, it will be more of the same. But what do? We engage with all concerned, we remain hands off. And as regards the other powers who are there, we play to our strengths. We let them play to their strengths. And if we deliver on time, we'll be fine. We play to our strengths and we deliver on time. That is all we need to do. Stay hands on. Let them resolve their stuff. My view.
A very strategic roadmap, I would say, and India's role is clearly seen as a pivotal here. And just on this basis only, my last question would also on the what are the viable pathways you see as a regional cooperation on this kind of security and conflict management in the Bay of Bengal, either through existing frameworks or through the development of new institutional mechanism. Do you think that we need such kind of a new institutional mechanism, or we are good with the existing framework which is there for our regional cooperation?
See, when you look at the map of South Asia, you see one huge country surrounded by smaller countries. So, for regional mechanisms, uh, General Ziaur Rahman made an effort and he brought in SARC. And you know why SARC is in limbo. Then we encouraged BIMSTEC. BIMSTEC went part of the way, but then these political developments in our two neighboring countries have created issues with BIMSTEC. The sixth BIMSTEC summit, which took place after a long time in 2025 June, that had some positives. But now with this coup in Bangladesh in August, certain portions of the agreement made have come unstuck because they put restrictions and things of that sort, and we had no choice but also to react. So some of the clauses may have lost a bit of relevance. So what is the other model we can use? Uh, there are two options. One is that maybe we look at a third party from outside the region. And for that, one looks at the Japanese. They've been doing a lot of work in the northeast and in Bangladesh, say. So the one of the ports there, the latest port is what they're supposed to be constructing. I'm forgetting the name. I think it is Sonadia. No, not Sonadia. Another one. Forgetting the name. One port which they're constructing in Bangladesh. So maybe we tie up with a country like Japan and with the concerned country in question, and we go into some projects. So they're also, okay, that okay, India is doing it with somebody else, and to that extent, we are able to generate some goodwill. Otherwise, it is best what the government is following. We do a one-to-one with each country because a one-size-fits-all is not going to work. I mean, if you just look at water, we are sharing 54 rivers with Bangladesh. With Nepal, we are sharing Gandak, Kosi, and a few other rivers. But the problems with Nepal with water management, the problems with Bangladesh with water management, the problems with Pakistan with water management, all three are separate. So how exactly do you make a water sharing framework? So maybe this is just a very, very crude example I'm giving, but maybe one-to-one is the best way, whether it is tariffs, non-tariff barriers, water, electricity. And but the last point which I want to say, it is in the long-term interest of all these nations in the Bay to separate their strategic concerns from mutually benefiting economic policy. Separate strategic concerns from mutually benefiting economic policy. Maybe we'll see some help.
So that's really an encouraging vision, I would say, and cooperation could be a game changer in this competitive environment. And I must thank you for that insightful conversation on the Bay of Bengal region about the whole security, cooperation, and the management, and the challenges which are, which we are yet to see or experience in that way. So, what an insightful discussion, General Deb. Thank you so much for your expert perspective on navigating these great power competition in the Bay of Bengal. And to our listeners, we hope this episode of Reimagining the Bay of Bengal has deepened your understanding also of the region's security dynamics. And stay tuned for our more discussions.